Good evening. I'm Mary Madden, Director of the Museum and Education Division of the Kansas Historical Society. Thank you for joining us tonight for our monthly virtual Museum After Hours program, coming to you from the Kansas Museum of History. The museum reopened in June, and thanks to the Kansas Department of Education, you and your family can visit for free. It's a great new program called the Sunflower Program, a Sunflower Summer Program, allows K through 12 students and up to 2 adults free admission to the museum and also to Pawnee Indian Museum State Historic Site, one of our sites near Republic. What you need to do is go online and download the app Sunflower Summer, one word, .org. The Sunflower Program encourages families to get out, explore new things, and enjoy time together as a family. And you can visit up to 71 sites in Kansas for free. The program runs through August 15th. As always, tonight's program will be followed by a question and answer period with our presenter. Please use the Q&A link at the bottom of the screen to post your questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. Tonight, we are joined by Nikki Klarmann, the Public Outreach Archeologist for the Historical Society, one of our own. Nikki received her master's degree from Michigan State University, where she is currently pursuing her PhD in anthropology. Nikki will be sharing a project near and dear to her. The Brown v. Board of Education National Historic Site in Topeka is the location of the 2022 Kansas Archeology Training Program's Field School. Nikki is the principal investigator for the planned excavation, and she will be describing the important work to be accomplished there next June and how you can participate. The Brown v. Board Historic Site is a location of the Monroe Elementary School, a segregated school for Black children prior to the 1954 landmark Supreme Court school desegregation case. Homes of African-American families once stood on much of the land the school occupies today. The planned field school will explore the remains of some of the structures buried on the property and use archaeology to help tell the story of the people who lived in the Monroe School neighborhood. So please join me in welcoming Nikki Klarmann.
Thank you, Mary. I'm Nikki, and I will go ahead and share my screen, and we will get started with the presentation. And like Mary said, we'll take questions at the end. So thank you all for joining us, and let's get started. Okay, so the title of my presentation is Monroe School Maps, a plan for archaeological excavation at Brown versus Board of Education National Historic Site. So just a brief outline of the presentation. I will first talk about what KATP Field School is and what KATP means. I'll talk about the history of the property of Brown v. Board, previous testing and excavations on the property, and then our plans for 2022's field school. And this is an 1880 lithograph drawn by Augustus Koch and it's of Topeka. So I thought this was an interesting image to include here. So let's get started. So first, let's talk about KATP Field School. So what is KATP? So KATP stands for the Kansas Archeology Training Program Field School. And it's an opportunity for the public to participate in all aspects of an archaeological project. So excavation as well as laboratory work, cleaning and cataloging artifacts. And it's a great opportunity to work alongside professional archaeologists and amateur archaeologists who are part of the Kansas Anthropological Association, are partners on the project since 1975. And we work closely with them. There's a dedicated group of volunteers that serve in staff positions during the field school. And it's a great opportunity. It's open to people 12 and older to participate in. So in 2022, the program will run from June 3rd through the 18th. It was going to run through the 19th, but because Juneteenth was recognized as a federal holiday, we are not going to have field school that day, and we're going to encourage participants to attend any Juneteenth celebrations happening in Topeka, which I know there will be some because the Juneteenth group in Topeka is very active and had some great events this year. We'll be exploring the grounds of Brown versus Board of Education National Historic Site. And our partners on the project, along with the KAA, are the National Park Service and the Midwest and archaeologists from the Midwest Archeological Center. And I'd like to shout out to Dexter Armstrong, one of the park rangers and head of interpretation at Brown v. Board, for attending. And if there's questions I can't answer, Dexter will be able to hopefully answer some of those with me. So, like Mary said earlier, Brown versus Board of Education National Historic Site commemorates the 1954 Supreme Court decision overturning legal segregation. The site is the Monroe Elementary School, which was built in 1926, and it was attended by plaintiff Oliver Brown's daughter, Linda Brown. And this is a newspaper article about that ruling. So now we're going to talk about the history of the property. But before I can do that, I need to recognize that Topeka, as we know it, was not always Topeka, right? It wasn't always there. And so we acknowledge that the state of Kansas and Topeka is part of the traditional lands of several indigenous American tribes and nations, past and present. And we honor with gratitude the land and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. And we commit to continuing to learn how to be better stewards of this land as well. So we have to go way back to kind of start the story of the Monroe Elementary School. So the Kansas-Nebraska Act is adopted May 30th, 1854. It created the Kansas and Nebraska territories. And with this, residents in those areas could decide whether to allow slavery. And this led to the Bleeding Kansas period. This also leads to the creation of Topeka, which was founded December 5th, 1854. A group of 9 men met on the banks of the Kansas River. They drafted an agreement which created the Topeka Association, which was responsible for the establishment and growth of Topeka. So just a year later, a man named John Ritchie moved to what was then Topeka, became Topeka. He was a free stater and abolitionist from Indiana. Many of you probably know who John Ritchie is, and he moved to Kansas in 1855. He purchased 160 acres of land in Topeka, which was called the Ritchie's Addition eventually. By 1856, he had established a homestead. You can actually visit that. The Shawnee County Historical Society has his home preserved, and you can visit it, which is very cool. So by the 1880s, John Ritchie was selling much of his land to formerly enslaved people. And he actually died in 1887, and the Ritchie Addition or tract of land was annexed in 1888, dividing it into smaller parcels and being sold to people. So now we're going to kind of move through time, right, for what is the Monroe School. So in 1868, we know that there was a building being rented as a school, but we're not sure where it was. There's documents of it being called Monroe Street School, but we don't know its exact location. I was able to find a newspaper printing of the Monroe Street School, the teachers that were there at the time, but we don't know exactly where it was, if it was on the current property of Brown v. Board or if it was somewhere nearby, but it's somewhere on Monroe Street, obviously. So in 1873, we have a map, it's the earliest map of that location of where Brown v. Board is today at 15th and Monroe Streets. And it was made by American cartographer F.W. Pierce. And it actually has some structures and property owners listed. On lot 511, J. Langston is listed, and there's a Jesse S. Langston in the 1874-1875 Topeka City Directory as a carpenter who has residence on Southwest Monroe between 15th and 16th. And there's other family members listed at that residence, John C. and Viola Langston. So then there on lot 523, there's a JR, which is probably John Ritchie. And he may have built on the property one of the earliest structures on the block. And this map provides us information about the neighborhood inhabitants, some of them, and that John Ritchie had sold at least one lot of land in the Monroe neighborhood by this time, by 1873. And then in 1874 is roughly when we believe the Monroe School was built, not the current building, but an earlier building which stood just north of the current building. It was built at 15th and Monroe, and it's called the Monroe School. And there is a newspaper article mentioning the opening. I'm not sure if this is actually the new school, if they were still in the street school building at this point, the rented building, but it is cool to see them mentioning schools opening in 1874 in January. And then in 1883 and 1885, we have Sanborn insurance maps, which the Sanborn Map Company, these were created for fire insurance companies to assess their liability in urbanized areas of the United States. But in 1883 and 1885, we don't have the location where Brown v. Board is on the map, right? So there is no map from this time period. It's just south right here. And so they just missed it in the Sanborn map. So we don't have it from those dates. But the next date that we do have maps of is in 1889, which is, this is the first Sanborn map that shows the 1874 school building and at least 8 structures on the property. So the school here, obviously, then there is a frame dwelling, a possible horse barn, and then a brick dwelling, an outbuilding, and then 3 outbuildings for the school. And so those were there, we know, in 1889 based on this Sanborn map. Then in 1896, there's 9 structures on the property. The 1874 school and the 2 dwellings from the 1889 map are still there. The outbuildings have actually been replaced by larger outbuildings, the school outbuildings here. And then the barn of 1889 was replaced by 2 smaller structures, this one, and then a smaller outbuilding. And then lot 515 here remains empty at this time. And then in 1889, we have a George A. Ogle Co. map and they're out of Chicago. It's a very general map of the 1870s for Monroe School. You can see it right here. I did love that it said Ritchie's edition here, but here is what they're labeling as the school. But the problem with this map is it's very generalized, and the school is actually more in the center of lots 505 and 507. But this is just an atlas showing maps of each township with the names of landowners, but there's no other structures indicated on the property in this map. But so we know it's pretty general because the next map we have is from 1913, and it is also a Sanborn map, and it shows that the school is actually enlarged to the west. A large section, a 30-foot section, was added to the western side of the school. And do note that some of the Sanborn maps have very outdated terminology on them, and so just recognizing that, and apologies for that. But the school outbuildings have been removed here. The frame dwellings still hanging on, it's still there, and it's one of the other buildings, or its outbuilding, is still there. And then the small brick house is gone, the one that used to be right here, and its outbuildings were likely raised. And then, so the addition was added in 1911, and then the school board also then acquired lots 513 and 515 for extra outdoor space by this time. And this is first time we're seeing south of lot 515. And so we're really seeing. And lot 521, there's a frame structure and outbuilding, likely the structure seen on the 1873 Beers map with renovations to it. And then there's a brick dwelling here on lot 525 and a frame dwelling here on lot 529. So the 1920s brings some change to the property. In 1925, the board purchases the additional lots that are south of the school. In 1926, Monroe Elementary School is constructed, which is the current school, the current building there on that property. And then in 1927, the original Monroe School is demolished. So they built the new school and had school until, they had the new school built, and then they demolished the older school. So this is actually an image dated between 27 and 29, so in the early days of the new building. And then the next time we see a map of the properties in 1940, and it's showing the 1926 Monroe Elementary School, and that's kind of the differentiation. The 1874 school is Monroe School, and the 1926 Monroe Elementary School. So it looks like all of the auxiliary buildings, those dwellings have been removed. They would have kind of gone to lot 529 was the furthest south in the property that was owned by the public schools, or that we could see that would be affected by the school property. There is one outbuilding remaining here on the property, and in 1940 the school board then acquired these parcels here to the east, and they used that for a playground. So then in 1950 and 1955, there's not a lot of changes really from the 1940 map. Pretty similar. The outbuilding is still there in 1950, still hanging on over here, but by 1955 it is gone. And still no evidence here of any structures in the eastern field. So now we're kind of moving into the time period for why the site has significance, right? The Monroe Elementary was the segregated school attended by Linda Brown, daughter of Oliver Brown. In 1951, a lawsuit was brought against the city of Topeka to end school segregation. And in 1954, it went to the Supreme Court, and well, in 1954, they had the Supreme Court decision, and it ended segregation in public schools. And it was decided on May 17th, 1954, that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. So after this time period, the school actually remains open until 1975, when it was closed due to declining enrollment and what was considered substandard facilities at that time. In 1980 to 1988, the property changed ownership multiple times. It was used a lot for storage by the school board, the public schools, things like that, but it changed ownership a couple times. But then in 1991, the Trust for Public Land purchased the property. And then at the end of 1991, it was designated a National Historic Landmark. And on October 26, 1992, it was designated Brown v. Board of Education National Historic Site. And then in 1993, it was transferred to the National Park Service, but the school building was then renovated in the late 90s, early 2000s, and opened with the building opening as an interpretive and resource center in 2004. So let's kind of summarize what we've got going on the property. There's at least 8 structures of varying types that once stood on the grounds of Brown v. Board, based on maps alone. There's no evidence that there were structures in the eastern lot. I'm not surprised, because you can kind of see right here, it's right by the railroad. So people maybe didn't want to build right on that. And so we've got 18 structures. So structure 1, you can see in this map, it's based on the Sanborn maps. And this is from MWAC archaeologist Jay Sturdivant's 2004 report on the work done at the site. Structure 1 is the Monroe School here, and its addition here. Structure 2, 3, and 4 are those original school outbuildings. 5 is that frame dwelling. 7 is that brick dwelling that we saw on the 1889 map. And it's associated, the horse barn is structure 6, and then associated outbuildings. And then the outbuildings were rebuilt by 1896. And so that's why there's different numbers, 9, 10, and 11. And same with the horse barn was replaced by those 2 outbuildings, 2 buildings, 12 and 13 here, and then an outbuilding 14, and then frame dwelling and its associated outbuildings seen on the 1913 and 1945 map. Well, the outbuilding was, and then this brick dwelling on the 1913 map, and then a frame structure on the 1913 map, structure 18. So there's definitely potential for buried remains of the structures to be intact. And so we're going to explore next the previous testing and excavations that have taken place on the property. So in 1997, The gas line on the west side of the Monroe Elementary School was replaced, and they found limestone and concrete mortar foundation along this west foundation of the 1926 school building, the one standing today. And they determined that it was an element of a coal bin and a light well. And this was mainly, they encountered it, they excavated it, and recorded it. And then the next time, and MWAC is the Midwest Archeological Center. It just shortened, the nice acronym shortens it. But in 1999, the Midwest Archeological Center came back to the site and they did a geophysical survey. So basically scanning below the surface of the earth to look for buried deposits without having to disturb the ground. It's a great technology. There's various types. In 1999, they were looking for buried cultural remains ahead of the school's remodel for that 2004 opening as an interpretive center. And they were looking at the suitability of various instruments for identifying remnants of structure. So they did soil resistivity, which is how much the soil resists or conducts electrical current, ground penetrating radar, which uses radar pulses to image the subsurface, and then magnetometer, which measures magnetic field changes affected by, and it's affected by large amounts of iron and electrical lines. And each of these is affected by certain things. So they only did soil resistivity in the grassy areas. And then they only did the ground penetrating radar in the areas covered by asphalt and concrete, because it can scan through those items, but it could only go to about 50 centimeters below the surface. And then magnetometer, I'm not exactly sure where exactly it was all done, but these three methods confirm the presence of possibly historic structures and other undocumented features. And I don't have great pictures from the 1999 work, but what I do have is how they laid out their grid on top of the school. And this was just to help them keep track of where they were using different techniques and keeping that information separate. So that was the geophysical in 1999. So what ends up happening later in 2000 is there were test excavations to look at some of the anomalies or things that were seen in the subsurface scanning. They set up 3 1 meter by 2 meter units, 1, 2, 3, over some of the strong magnetic anomalies. And then they opened a trench here north of the current building, the current 1926 school. And they located the remains of the basement floor of the 1874 Monroe School up here. And then south of the school, they got a lot of school related items, construction debris, and other late 19th century artifacts. But the anomaly sources weren't definitively linked to any former dwellings or outbuildings, even though Trench 3 was on top of what is structure 17, that frame dwelling, no, that brick dwelling. And then north of the school, there was a smooth concrete slab, and that was the basement floor below a layer of construction debris. And here you can see an image from those excavations showing that concrete slab, the foundation of the basement floor of the 1874 Monroe School. And then in 2001 to 2003, there were multiple, I think 8 archaeological monitoring projects conducted by the Midwest Archeological Center. And it was mainly monitoring of trenching activities in areas where historic structures were once present. There was limited testing excavation. Mainly it was watching while trenching was taking place and seeing if they uncovered any cultural remains. And this took place west, north, and east sides of the school. You can see kind of a breakdown of several projects that some are multiple visits to the school. They found 5 structural foundations and part of the north wall of the same light well that they encountered in 1997 when they were redoing the gas line. All cultural materials were found about 70 to 110 centimeters below the modern ground surface. And they also found the school basement stairs. So previously in 2000, they found the foundation, and then they found the stairs going into the basement. And then also in 2002, there was the first work that we know of done in the field across the street that was used as a playground and later like a ball field. And there were several trenches there for a geothermal trenching for a new geothermal system, and they were monitoring during that time, and they found evidence of a historic 19th century dump site in the field. Its exact dimensions are unknown, mainly because the trenches didn't affect certain areas, so they couldn't test there. But we know that there's some kind of dump site that was no longer being used by about 1940 when this field became a playground. So here you can see those basement steps and more of the foundation that were encountered during these monitoring projects. And then, well, it says 2021 Geophysical Survey, apologies. We went there a couple of weeks ago working with the Midwest Archeological Center. They were there for a couple of days, and myself and state archaeologist Bob Hort attended and helped them out one day. And they used ground penetrating radar and resistivity in the north and south lawns of the property, here in red. And the report is currently in progress by MWAC archaeologist Adam Wewell. And the resistance survey south of the school is going to 1 meter probe spacing. There's something about where the probes that need to be in contact with the ground, the spacing helps give us a greater detection depth and reveal deeper features, since excavations have shown that features are between 70 and 110 centimeters below the surface of the earth, below the ground surface. And those early 1999 geophysicals were only scanning to about 50 centimeters below the surface. So not going to pick up those buried materials. And it's also expanding the radar from what was done in 99. Because remember, in 99, they only did the asphalt and concrete areas. And so we did the grass areas as well. So let's kind of summarize the site archaeology. So 2 archaeological sites are recorded with the Kansas Historical Society on the property. 14 SH 113, 14 is the Kansas code, that's our state code, SH is Shawnee County, 113, you would think that it would be the 113th site recorded in the state, but previously the way site numbers were given archaeologically different. And so it's not the 113th site recorded in the States. It's kind of an arbitrary number. So that includes the current school building and all the grounds to the west, the western property. And that includes the 18 buried structures that we have here. And then SH 114 is the historic dump site in the eastern bluff in the playground field. And so those are how we kind of differentiate archaeologically the property. There's also been cultural landscape inventories and a historic resources study that have taken place on the property, but I didn't have time to speak about them here. The cultural landscape inventories were 1995 and 2014, and cultural landscape guidelines were published in 2000. And then the historical resources study was published in 1999. And I believe those are available on the National Parks website. There may be redacted copies, but I think they're available. So now let's talk about how we're going to take all this information and kind of relay it and turn it into our KATP plans for next summer. So the goals of next summer's field school is we want to learn more about the early days of the Monroe School neighborhood and the people that lived there. The focus is, as it should be, on the Brown v. Board Supreme Court case, but there's a whole vibrant history of the Monroe School neighborhood prior to the Supreme Court case, leading up to it. And that history of that property is very extensive. You saw 18 structures, several rebuilding episodes of outbuildings, and we can learn a lot about the lives that people led by the items they left behind, right? And what life was like for students at the school as well. Those school-related items are really important. So we want to explore the auxiliary buildings from the earlier Monroe School maps, and we want to better define the limits of the historic dump site in the field across Monroe Street. And so there's potential for great programming and collaboration with community organizations. Examples would be speakers, tours, visits to other Topeka landmarks, Hoping the Ritchie House, and other places as well, to talk about early Topeka and what life was like there. The Kansas Archeological Association, our partners, they plan the evening programs, but they're working closely with myself at the Kansas Historical Society and Brown v. Board of Education staff. So with all of our contacts in the community, I think we'll have a really great set of programs. We do evening programs, but as I'll mention in the next page, there's some potential for during the day classes, potentially from our Historic Preservation Office here and other departments here at the Historical Society. So logistics, the excavation is going to be obviously at Brown versus Board of Education at 15th and Monroe, and then we'll have lab work here at the Historical Society in the archaeology lab with Chris Garst, our lab archaeologist, running that, and I will be running the excavations. On Mondays, our excavation and lab is closed because KSHS staff archaeologists need, they can't go 16 days straight. And so we are closed, but we are working to have classes happening and programs happening those days so that there is still things for participants to do and really interesting different things, get a little taste of something else on the days that excavation and the lab are closed. So important dates, March 1st, 2022, registration is going to open, and that will be through the Kansas Historical Society website, and it will go out kind of on all of our social media and Brown v. Board social media, hopefully. Dexter, you can answer that. And so there'll be places to register through kshs.org/KATP. And then registration closes May 31st, 2022. That just kind of gives us time before the field school starts on June 3rd to kind of get our paperwork squared away. The field school starts June 3rd and will end June 18th because of the federal holiday for Juneteenth that we're really happy about. So some partners and contacts. I didn't want to put everybody's emails in here because it's going to be on YouTube and things like that. But for names, at Brown versus Board of Education National Historic Site, Sherda Williams and Dexter Armstrong are our partners working closely with us on planning the field school. At Midwest Archeological Center is Jay Sturdivant and Adam Wewell, and Kansas Anthropological Association, Kent Lee, President, and Mo Floyd, first vice president, and all of the executive board. There's a lot of you, but shout out to everybody. And so we're all working really hard on planning it. We're going to be reaching out to a lot of community organizations over the coming year, planning programs and working with people invested in the property and the history and the site, making sure that we're working closely with them, recognizing that I, as a Euro-American white woman, working in a community on an archaeological project in an urban setting that is predominantly African-American, wanting to work and reach out to my colleagues and community members and work closely that we're supporting and being sensitive to our community. Okay, questions? Mary, should I stop sharing the screen?
Yeah, you can stop sharing now. And oh, there I am. I'm back. Hi.
Hi.
So how do people sign up? What's the process for being able to participate?
Right.
And, like, are there ages? Are there costs?
Yeah. So we like to say we're the cheapest archaeological field school that's open to the public. There are costs, but if you are a member of the Kansas Anthropological Association or the Kansas Historical Society Foundation, you get a reduced registration. Of students is $15, anyone 65 and older is $25, and standard registrants is $35. And that's for the whole time. That's one-time payment for the whole 2 weeks. You can come, some people come out just on the weekends. So some people come a couple days, some take their vacation time, and we see them every year, and they take their vacation time to be with us. So it's kind of what you're interested in, right? And there's different places you can go. If you do not feel like you are physically able to be outside for 8 hours straight in June in Topeka, you can spend time in the lab. And if you are don't think you are physically able to spend time excavating, you can spend time in the lab. Or if you're just interested in artifacts, which is, the lab is so important in archaeology. Most people think, oh, it's just excavation, but the lab is how we understand and analyze and interpret what we're finding, right? We're a team, right? The lab and excavation. So participants we need them to be 12 and up. Anyone 12 to, I believe, 15 or 16 need to have like an adult, or 14 need to have like someone with them all the time, like a parent or guardian, and then 14 to 17 can have like a sponsor where they're not with them all day, but maybe someone's sponsoring them for the program and participating. And I think our oldest participant, I think he might be 94 this year. So, like, any age welcome. It's a great chance to work alongside professionals and amateurs. And some of the people from Kansas Archeological Association have been doing this for 46 years. So, you're getting a wealth of knowledge and experience. And so registration will open March 1st, and the registration link, it's online registration. It's available through our website. It'll launch, and we'll share that on social media and things like that.
Great, great. Well, people should sign up for our KSHS e-newsletter, just in general. And so that way you will be informed not only of this, but all the other things we're doing. We do have a question about what type of artifacts do you expect to dig up?
So we expect to find a lot of 19th century artifacts, a lot of glass, metal, things like that. Construction debris are pretty common from what I'm reading in the older reports, just because there's been a lot of construction, but also hopefully foundational, maybe foundations of one of those brick buildings we found, or evidence of the frame dwellings there. And then think about outbuildings, right? Those are restrooms, and people just threw stuff away in them. So we will find things there. I mean, archaeologists excavate trash, right?
Right.
What people left behind, oftentimes trash. And so we'll find a lot of like school related, maybe slate pencils, things like that.
Somebody's homework.
Probably not someone's homework though, maybe, they didn't turn it in. The ground ate their homework, who knows? But we'll find a lot of those like bottle glass and glass like that, and metal and things like that at the site.
Is there any special training required?
No, we provide the training at the field school. The first time you come, you'll go to our orientation, which is literally orienting you to the site and what we'll be doing and what our methods are. And then if it's your first time attending ever, you attend a Principles of Archaeology class right after that. And it basically tells you, what is archaeology? What am I doing? What is excavation? Things like that, so that you kind of have a little understanding going in. And then
that's like a couple hours, right?
That's like the first 3 hours of your day. And then when you go in the field, and the lab, we have several longtime volunteer staff members, right? Members of the KAA who've been doing this for a long time, and they serve in staff positions like a site supervisor, crew chiefs, coordinators in the lab, things like that, that help us, because we are a smaller staff of archaeologists here at the Historical Society, help us run the program. And it's so valuable having their support and their partnership on this program.
Is there something that you would find that would just make your day? Is there something special you're looking for?
I want to find some of the structures on the property and just confirming their locations, which I think we would with the Sanborn maps being pretty accurate. Potential to excavate a little more of the early school building in the basement, which would be interesting to see if there's anything left on the ground, but they demolished it, so they probably cleaned it out because they reopened. But some of those structures would be really exciting, and yeah, that's what I'm hoping to find. And I think the goal is to provide the historic site and the Park Service information that they can use in interpretation to talk about that early time period, because the Monroe School neighborhood was a traditionally Black neighborhood, and having that information about those early days after John Ritchie moved there and started selling parcels of land in the addition, having kind of information that kind of expands the story of the Brown v. Board case itself, right? And so I think that'll be really valuable just to help tell that story.
And this isn't the only African-American site that you've excavated.
Right. Oh gosh, I don't know what year because I wasn't here, but they
yes,
earlier in the mid 2000s, I'm sure. I think Chris, our lab archaeologist, watching, chiming, knowing exactly what date. But we went to the Nicodemus site, which is also a National Historic Site, an exodester town, so formerly enslaved people coming from Tennessee in the South. And making a home in Nicodemus, and excavations were done there. Partnering again at that time with the Park Service, and I believe we were partnering with Shirta Williams at that time, who was our partner on that project. So Shirta, I believe, she's a great partner. So I'm really excited that we've been working with her.
Well, some of the work that you've done or has been done here with the Nicodemus site, some of those artifacts are actually on loan to the National African American Museum and Cultural Center, the newest Smithsonian.
Yes, they are.
So, good job, doing good work.
That's a fantastic testament to the program, right? That we can work with these national museums to promote Kansas, right? That's our whole goal, is promoting, learning about, and preserving the history of Kansas.
Another question, do you use folks who have metal detectors for sweeps of back dirt?
We have in the past. A lot of our participants are avid metal detectorists. And so I haven't exactly written the field manual for next summer's excavation. I'm waiting for those 2021 geophysical results, but that was just 2 weeks ago, and I don't want to rush Adam. He's a little busy. But we may. There's potential for doing that. But we do screen artifacts. We use 1/4-inch mesh to screen, and there's potential for doing something called water screening that would help us find smaller items. Because you think historic site, there's still going to be bones and shell and things like that, smaller items that people were eating, right? Food waste.
Animal bones.
Yeah,
Animal
bones. Yes, sorry. That are going to be really small. Think of fish bones, those are tiny. And we can find those in doing kind of finer screening mesh. But there is potential for metal detection, but that'll be kind of decided later in the process.
Is there any way you can guarantee the weather will be good?
No, unfortunately, I cannot. Kansas, we know it's very fickle. If it is raining, we try to have some presentations kind of on standby by archaeology staff. I think in 2019, I presented about my dissertation research. We whipped presentations out, so you'll still learn something, or it's a day for you to explore Topeka and what Topeka has to offer.
You work in the hot sun, but when it's raining,
I would like to know, we do provide shade for our participants. We're one of few field schools that try to have tents over everybody, or well, at least over all the excavation units, and most people are under those, or try to set up screening in the shade, things like that. Sometimes you are going to be in the sun, but if you're excavating, we try to keep you shaded because we know it's hot.
And hydrated, yeah.
Yeah.
Will work be done under the asphalt?
No, we will not be digging up any sidewalks or asphalt. It will only be in the green spaces, so north of the school and south of the school, and then in the eastern park, the kind of triangle of land to the east of the school, potentially excavating there. So we won't be disturbing any of the sidewalks or asphalt.
Well, I think you've answered everyone's questions.
Excellent.
And I hope you get a lot of registrants from this. I've done my time working in the field on different digs, and there's a reason I'm a historian and not an archaeologist. You're much braver and more durable, but it is a wonderful learning experience. And I think anyone who has the time will be very pleased that they did that. Oh, one more question just came in from somebody. I think we know Virginia Wolfcall. She was the public archaeologist here for many years and a good friend. Will there be any oral histories collected?
So like I mentioned, so we won't have excavation or lab work on Mondays, and they may not know this yet, but I'm going to be reaching out to my state archives colleagues, asking if they want to do what we call a scan and share, potentially also recording oral histories where people in the community can come, bring documents, photos, they can get scanned and given back to them, but also allowing the Historical Society to use them in the archives, but maybe potentially having oral histories also be recorded, which I think would be so valuable because a lot of the community members have lived in the area for a long time and have stories that they could tell that would shed light on those days of the Monroe Elementary School.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. We're going to let you go have your evening with your cute little son and husband. And thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Mary. I hope everyone has a lovely evening and signs up for field school next year.
Yeah.
Yay.
So please join us again on Friday, August 13th. It is Friday the 13th, but it'll be okay. When Dr. Sandra Enriquez, Assistant Professor of History at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, will speak on making a home in the heartland, Mexican immigration to Kansas City in the early 20th century. Dr. Enriquez will show that despite facing discrimination, racism, and exploitation, Mexican immigrants established roots in the city and created vibrant communities on both sides of the state line that they made their heartland home. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's presentation and we'll log in again next month. And don't forget to download your app, sunflowersummer.org, and we've put that information in the Q&A section so that you can visit us and 70 other sites in Kansas for free. So from all of us